Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and a very good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you. On behalf of the organizer, the General Council for Islamic Banks and Financial Institutions, I have the pleasure and honor of welcoming all of you to this first ever online CBAFI in Focus session. We would like to thank you, our member, the Astana International Financial Center, for hosting this session within the framework of this online Astana Finance Days 2020. Ladies and gentlemen, CBAFI virtual in focus session with the theme Financial Technologies, Disruption or Growth Lever for Islamic Finance Industry brings together an international panel of distinguished speakers, fintech experts, and Islamic finance industry stakeholders to discuss fintech adoption in Islamic financial institution with a deep dive into the current practices and the faced challenges. It will also look into the structural changes undertaken for fintech adoption, its impact on operations and activities, as well as the plans of Islamic financial institutions for the years to come. We hope that this session will be beneficial to you, and we look forward to your continuous support to CBAFI's activities and initiatives in the future. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, may I call upon Dr. Abdulillah Bilatik, Secretary General of CBAFI, to start off with his welcoming and opening remarks. Dr. Bilatik, the cloud is yours.
Thank you, Muhammad. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Excellencies, distinguished speakers and guests, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you, wherever you are. It's a great pleasure to be here again and to welcome you on behalf of CBAFI for this In Focus session, this virtual In Focus session on financial technology disruption and growth lever for Islamic finance industry. And I would like first to thank the Astana International Financial Center, our long-term partner, for hosting today In Focus session that we hope it will be beneficial. I would like to, first of all, thank all of you for attending with us this session and thank our distinguished speakers for making the time to share with us their insights on this very topical issue and to see what are the opportunities or threats that derive from financial technologies. The Islamic financial services industry in general, or the Islamic finance industry as well, they are being transformed by a number of technologies, all related to digitalization and the way we service our customers. These are commonly bundled under the term fintech, financial technologies. So it goes from high-speed algorithmic trading in financial markets to delivery of small-scale payment services through smartphone. The question remains, of course, with all these disruptions, are they a threat really for the financial markets, for the Islamic finance, or Islamic banking, or they are perhaps an opportunity? So we hope that today's session will shed more light on this. To share with you, perhaps to set the background for the discussion, to share with you some of the findings of our Global Islamic Bankers Survey that we will be actually releasing today or tomorrow on this opportunity of this focused session, with the theme was Beyond Digitalization, beyond digitalization, that's focused on financial technologies and how they are embedded into the customers' relationship between Islamic banks and their customers, and what are the types of services that are offered in this sense. So we asked Islamic banks, and we got a very important response rate. We asked heads of Islamic banks about their level of adoption of fintech and related digital transformation on Islamic banking compared to conventional banks in their jurisdictions. We got responses from over 100 chief executive officers from 35 jurisdictions, and we were really, in general, very pleased with the responses, knowing that in most cases, 75 to 80% of the Islamic banks, they were thinking that they are at least at par with their conventional counterparts, and in some cases exceeding them. This is from reflections. The banks, they were then asked about the level, their institutions, they were putting fintech and digital transformation at the core of their activities. And here we see a shift. What was perhaps a bit low previous years, we have now, most institutions, like for example, we have most institutions, they said they were doing so either to a substantial extent, over 46%, to a very great extent, 30%, meaning over maybe 85 or 90%, they are putting now financial technologies at the core of their business, of their strategies. Moreover, to see what this really means in practice, institutions, we asked them what extent they were currently implementing certain named fintech trends or like solutions, for example, mobile banking payments. So mobile banking payments clearly came as the highest level of implementation, whereas other technologies like distributed ledger technologies and robo-advisory, they have lower level, but they are in the radar of the Islamic banks, we can say. Plans for implementation for further fintech solutions, we asked the banks what is, how they plan to do it. What is their overall strategy on doing it? 60% they say they want to buy services for financial technologies. So, and another percentage comes second, those that want to develop solutions in partnership with fintech corporations and companies, and comes last as developing their own fintech solutions. So asking about the advantages that fintechs bring to the Islamic banks and the relationships with their customers, I think in most regions we have that's really the key reason, or what they note from this is that the possibility to, or the increased access to customers with younger age. So 92% of Islamic banks, they have this as their primary targets. So we have this and much more in the Global Islamic Bankers Survey. I will advise you to review, to look at the findings, to benchmark your organization, your institution with what is happening on other regions and other Islamic banks. So I think in general, we see that they certainly, fintech is certainly an opportunity for the Islamic finance industry as a whole. Is it a threat for certain types of organizations, or is it a growth lever? We tend to see what our distinguished panel of speakers will come up with their deliberations and their conclusions. So with this, I thank you very much for your attention, and we look forward to a fruitful debate. And I thank again our friends from Astana International Financial Center for their partnership. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bilatik. Ladies and gentlemen, it also gives me pleasure to introduce our second speaker for the session, and to represent our generous host, please welcome Mr. Nurulan Kuzainov, the chairman of the management board of AIFC Authority. Mr. Kuzainov, the cloud is yours.
Thank you. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you everybody for joining us. And big thanks to our partners, Sibafi, for making it in joint cooperation with AFC this week. This is a very special week for Astana International Financial Center. 2 years ago, officially, the first president of the Republic of Kazakhstan, Mr. Nazarbayev, launched the Astana International Financial Center. So we're rather probably the youngest financial center on the planet. We're still very young, but we've done already some very important milestones. We reached some important milestones, and we are, as they say, artificially created, sponsored by the government and pushed by the government financial center. It's very difficult in the modern world to compete because there are a lot of financial centers in the region. You know that Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Qatar, many others is launching such initiatives. But we are trying not to compete. We're trying to cooperate with all our rivals. And we managed, of course, to do a lot of homework. And with support of the government, with support of the president and parliament, we made a lot of changes into our national legislation. We changed the constitution. And based on constitution, we have a special jurisdiction called English Common Law Practices within the Astana International Financial Center. And the most important thing that we have the independent court system and independent judges. Those judges are presented they are ex-official judges of from UK, and we really honored that for many years Mr. Lord Wolf was the chief judge of our AFC courts, and now next week there will be new chief judge presented within the AFC. The key, the cornerstone, of course, was the legal system and the courts and arbitration. But meanwhile, we've done a great job on preparing the regulatory framework, and both for fintech and for Islamic finance, it was a challenge. But from another side, it was easy for us to build something from the scratch because the whole thing was built from scratch. So 2 years ago, our regulations and our frameworks were literally a white sheet of paper, and it was for many things it was easier to build from the scratch. And we also thank, of course, our partners in Islamic finance space and in fintech space who helped us to really to put together the most advanced, the most applicable frameworks and rules and regulations. And today we have in both in Islamic finance and fintech very advanced regulation, and which is already covering a lot of private sector institutions. They got license from AFSA. AFSA is independent regulator. They are independent from the central bank and from the government, and they do provide the licensing in various products for Islamic finance and in various products for fintech. So with the current world, we believe that now God is pushing us towards the kind of more online businesses and to be more efficient with the technologies. So with the pandemic situation across the world, we unveiled that there are a lot of open opportunities in online businesses, especially in financial services. Last crisis between 2009 2011 also was pushing the world to have more and more new instruments, alternative instruments for the population, for retail market, as well as for the whole market. But regulators of the world, traditional regulators of the world, they couldn't, or they didn't want, or they couldn't manage to really to help technology, to use the technologies to help to change the financial services landscape. But with the current crisis, which is coming from both from pandemic and also with trade wars and many other challenges, there is truly the time where we have to change dramatically the way we regulate, the way we consume financial services. and the way we are really building the adequate and balanced system of distribution of wealth between those who have the liquidity and those who is looking for the liquidity and those who is in the middle. So probably we need to really narrow down those gap between investors and those who are receiving investments, and have less and less middle players, and thus technology is to help us. Back to the Astana International Financial Center, I should say that we already have within our sandbox more than 20 companies which are providing different type of fintech services, starting from payment system, crowdfunding, and many other things. And we already have few licenses in Islamic finance space, and one of them is also a crowdfunding platform based on online online matching of those who wants to receive investment and those who wants to invest into the opportunities. So I can talk a lot about Astana International Financial Center and our role. I think geographically we're in the right place between China, Russia, India, and Pakistan, and many other countries in the Asia. So, and one of the biggest advantage is that we don't have the burden of being as a central bank or central regulator, and we are much more innovative. We are much more happy to face disruption and happy to help disruption, not to disrupt the world, but to provide better services than previous regulators or previous technology providers. Of course, we have to protect from another side. We have to protect the fintech world from the tech giants. We see the tech giants like Google's and Amazon's and maybe Alibaba and some others. They are also potentially monopolizing the market in terms of the e-commerce and financial services. So we really, our task of regulators and our task of such institutions like AFC to help not to have traditional banking replaced by giants coming from the tech space. So it's a big challenge again. So I hope that today's discussion and other discussions during the Astana Finance Days will help us to tackle those big questions around how we see the future of landscape. But in general, AFC is open for future newcomers and our old friends to use us to provide new type of services, new type of products. And we are the place where the fintech meets the Islamic finance. And the core element of this is the training facilities, preparing people, because we have a special Bureau for Continuous Professional Development, which is helping thousands and millions of people to improve their skills in both Islamic finance and fintech, and many more, not only those two areas. But this is where the people meet. Now, for the last few months, they meet virtually. They don't meet face-to-face, but probably meeting virtually and improving their skills virtually and improving their skills to be good expert on the virtual base, on the virtual platforms, will probably give another boost for AFC to provide and feed the future market participants with quality human resources who have vast experience and well prepared to tackle the next level of the financial services. I will stop here. Thank you very much again for our partners, and welcome to AFC, and happy to join the further discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Kuzainov. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor to call upon one of our distinguished female speaker for today, Ms. Talia Minolina. She is Chief Executive Officer of Taristan Investment Development Agency and a member of the Government of the Republic of Taristan. Ms. Minolina, the cloud is yours.
Thank you very much, dear ladies and gentlemen. It is my great pleasure. And I would like to start with a special thank to Sibafi and to Dr. Abdelila Bilatik in person, because he's a great friend of Tatarstan Republic and he visits Tatarstan quite often. And also Sibafi helps us a lot in terms of the development of Islamic finance theme in the Russian Federation. That is, Tatarstan is a part of Russia, right? And also, I would like to use this opportunity to send my best regards to Kazakhstan, our neighbor, and to Astana Financial dates that I happened to visit offline previously, but this time we are talking online. So it's also a great friend and strategic partner of Tatarstan Republic, the Republic of Kazakhstan. So I've got several slides to share with you, if it is okay, so that I can go through the presentation. And I would like to talk about the world fintech trends. And also about the COVID influence on fintech in general, and of course to share with you some of the examples of what we have done so far in fintech, in Islamic finance in the Republic of Tatarstan. This is the my 5 minutes talk that I would like to share with you. So the first trend of fintech is digital currency, for sure. The first European country that happened to actually to test pretty successfully the digital currency was France, and they did the digital euros. And now lots of countries, they are working on digital currencies as well, such as Germany, Sweden, Canada, the UK, Netherlands, Japan. And also what we know for now is China is testing now the digital currency already in 4 different territories. In Russia, we don't have the digital currency so far, and the central bank for now is not ready to organize something like that for now. The second big trend is like cybersecurity and user identification, and this is very it's all about sensitivity of personal data, as we all probably understand. The third important trend is growing need for big data analytics. And the fourth is responsible banking, and that is caring for the customer's financial health. And I think that it is very much connected to ethical business. That is about Islamic finance. That's all about Islamic finance is actually. So I put the responsible banking as a world trend, fintech trend that is really important in Islamic finance. The next one will be the invisible banking, and this is actually the partnership with technological platforms, so that the customers do not understand that they are dealing with the bank directly easily. They are doing that through technological platforms, through other services. And the next one is specificity and materiality, so that people would love to visualize what they spend money for, and this is also a trend of fintech. Next one is an integration of Internet of Things, and actually lots of cooperations in this very sector, so to say, the fintech sector. The next one is improving the services quality, and then banking as a service instead of software as a service, as we used to software as a service much, but banking as a service is something new, and also artificial intelligence in onboarding. Next, how did the coronavirus actually crisis affects the industry, and how did it affect the industry? The first important thing that I would like to emphasize is the mobile applications, so that now almost each digitalized decision, each digitalized software, they try to first of all to design in mobile form, so they have the mobile applications for everything instead of desktop applications. This is important. Next is again the growth in demand and expansion of user audience, but this is very much connected to the absence of physical contact. That, because of the crisis, is directly connected to security for now. So the absence of physical contact is connected to security, and this is really very important. And next important thing is the venture capital markets that suffers a lot. Then the blockchain, that is also about the transparency and about doing ethical business, right, is also a very big trend. So next one is what we see now in stock exchange is the growth of fintech companies' shares. And the last important thing that is the leaders. Today, the leaders in digitalization and in fintech actually are the US and China. Next, about the fintech in Russia. So in Russia, we see that the most digitalized in terms of the effectiveness sector is the financial sector. Next, the leaders in fintech today are the banks. So the traditional businesses, processes are changing under the influence of robotics and under the influence of Internet of Things in Russia. Also, I would like to emphasize the regulatory uncertainty in our country of fintech industries, and of course in Islamic finance and in fintech connected to Islamic finance as well. Sorry, it goes back. As for Tatarstan, what we are doing today is we try to promote the investment into the fintech industries. We've got the very well-developed investment infrastructure, such as several IT parks with business incubators, with startups development, with the funds, and also the special economic zone that is called Innopolis. This is an IT city that we created about 5 years ago. So we try to invest the budget money from Tatarstan Republic, as well as we try to attract lots of private money to somehow push the development of fintech sector in Tatarstan. And what we have done so far is, first of all, we've got a state bank that is called Akbar's Bank, and we see today that this is the social responsible fintech bank for today, because this was one of the first banks who joined, was connected to the platform of subsidizing interest rates for businesses during the COVID. And also they developed the face-to-pay helps to actually pay with the help of your face, because it is connected to your bank accounts, right? And in Innopolis city, the restaurants, the shops, everything that works through face-to-pay system. And this is also a fintech fintech example, very good example of how it works for today. Other important thing is that we try to use the e-commerce and develop e-commerce a lot, and we've got the R&D centers in Innopolis city that try to develop lots of fintech tools, especially for e-commerce things. Another important example is the fintech in Islamic finance services, so that in Tatarstan we developed halal start start a crowdfunding platform. And by the way, Mr. Nurlan just mentioned the crowdfunding platform as a very good example, and this is how it works. We've got the Halal Starter crowdfunding platform that helps us to actually to gather money, to get the money for some investment projects, and also for the sponsoring of some products, and also for some people who are in need of that. And another important thing is that just recently we based the new Laleh Share Investment Fund. This is the special investment fund that works according to Sharia, so it's like an Islamic finance directly thing, and it's a very good example a real example of how fintech and Islamic finance works in Tatarstan. Another important example is Sadaka Mat. It's the special initiative of one of the banks of Russia. They put the special machines inside the mosques so that we can gather money for different charity projects. And it's also one of the fintech examples that I would like to share. And like going to the end of my presentation, I would like to thank Astana Financial Days again and Sibafi for the support of our Russian and Islamic World Kazan Summit, because we organize it on an annual basis every year, and it's also the opportunity for us to discuss fintech and Islamic finance and other important issues for the development of Tatarstan relations, Russian regions relations with the OIC countries. This is my email address, so I would be really very glad to get any ideas or maybe any partnership suggestions for us if you do have some. It's a great pleasure for me to be a speaker of this very session. My best regards to Bahrain again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Minolina, and all distinguished keynote speakers. We look forward to hearing from you again in future events of Sibafi. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now proceed with our panel session, which I have also the honor to moderate. My name is Mohammed Bilal, and I'm working as a research economist at Sibafi. First, we would like to thank you, our 5 panelists with us today. And let me introduce them to you briefly. We have Ms. Yasmin Al-Sharaf. She is head of FinTech and Innovation Unit at the Central Bank of Bahrain. We also have Mr. Andrew Kunigam. He is founder of Darien Analytics Limited. We have Mr. Umar Munshi, who is co-founder of Ethics and president of Islamic FinTech Alliance. Our 4th speaker will be Mr. Khalid Havaldar. He is a Chief Strategy and Risk Officer at Blossom Finance. And we have Dr. Recep Bildik. He is Director of ComSec Project Group at Borsa Istanbul. I welcome all speakers to this session, and it is an honor to have you all. Today, our discussion for this session is certainly on a topic which is of high relevance for Islamic finance industry, at least from past few years. And it has now become more significant if we see in current scenario of COVID-19 pandemic. As we know, in last couple of years, we have seen a growing disruption by fintech in global financial services industry. And fintech is not only changing the way customers or clients are interacting with their financial institution, but I believe it is at the same time disrupting our long established business practices as well as our internal workflow. So today, our objective with our time is to share some of the thinking about how significant we see fintech is for Islamic finance industry, as well as we have to see what are the key opportunities or challenges we are facing in this regard. And also, how do we take it? Is it a disruption or a growth lever for Islamic finance industry? So now to open our discussion, I would like to start with Ms. Yasmin first. Ms. Yasmin, as the head of FinTech and Innovation Unit, you have worked closely with Islamic banks and other financial institutions as well. So in your experience, how do you see the significance of FinTech for Islamic financial institutions?
Thank you very much, Dr. Mohammed. I'd like to start by saying good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are from the world watching us today. I'd like to extend a special thanks to Sabafi for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to participate in this webinar today and in this panel. Going back to your question regarding the significance of fintech in relation to Islamic finance. My personal opinion, I believe that fintech is no less significant to Islamic finance than it is to conventional finance or conventional banking. There are huge opportunities that fintech provides to Islamic finance, as it does to conventional finance and banking. At the end of the day, fintech is merely the use of advanced technologies to either enhance the delivery of financial products and services to existing consumers, or to use these technologies to create new, more innovative products and services to meet the evolving demands and needs of end users and consumers. However, considering the fact that we are focusing on the significance of fintech to Islamic finance specifically, I can think of three different factors that can verify the role that fintech can potentially play within Islamic finance. The first of which is that the Muslim community globally is growing, the Muslim population. According to certain statistics, it has been expected that by the year 2060, Muslims globally will reach around 3 billion. That just means that we will expect to see a growing population of young Muslims, millennials, that come with a package of new different characteristics and behaviors and demands. They are going to be very tech savvy. They depend on smartphones, on digital platforms, and different aspects of their life, including to access their banking and financial services. Therefore, there will be a huge need for using fintech to develop and to deliver Sharia-compliant financial products and services in the future to meet the needs of this growing young Muslim population. The second factor is, again, according to statistics, today there are huge gaps within Muslim countries in terms of unbanked or underbanked segments. According to the Islamic Finance News, they once posted a statistic that showed that around 71% of Muslims globally today remain unbanked or don't have access to a banking account. And in another statistic that was posted by the World Bank in another study, they had reported that around only 14% of adults within the Middle East today have access to a bank account. And therefore, that really proves to show that there is a huge gap in terms of financial inclusion. And therefore, there is a huge potential and opportunity for fintech to play an important role in fostering more financial inclusion within Muslim communities globally. The third factor that I can think of that really shows, again, the relevance of fintech to Islamic finance. A lot of the advanced and popular technologies that we hear about today, specifically I'm referring to DLT technologies, smart contracts, they are promising to have characteristics that meet the main objectives or principles of the Islamic Sharia in terms of providing transparent, traceable financial transactions from one end, and from enhancing the overall governance of transactions. And therefore, taking these three different examples that I just provided, or these three different facts, there seems to be, no doubtly a huge significance for fintech within Islamic finance. Now, I know, like a lot of the two speakers that kickstarted the webinar, they mentioned the effect of COVID-19. And I personally believe that today, more than any time, fintech is becoming a necessity. There's a pressing need to move towards digitization. People are becoming more and more reluctant to use paper-based, to depend on paper or cash for their financial transactions. And surely in the post-COVID-19 era, I think that fintech is not going to be an option or a choice anymore. It will be rather a necessity. And therefore, there will be huge significance for fintech going forward.
Thank you, Ms. Yasmin. You have shared some very fascinating points. But here I want to bring Dr. Bildik into discussion to have his perspective on current fintech practices in the industry, and more specifically to equity market. Dr. Bildik, since you have been involved in product development, equity market operations, as well as in regulatory affairs. So in your experience, how do you see the fintech disruption for equity market in particular, and for Islamic finance market in general? And also, please share with us, what does that mean for Islamic equity market in particular?
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to extend my special thanks to CBP and yourself and all the organizers also who gave me the opportunity to speak and share my views with you today. Of course, Islamic finance has been growing worldwide, not only in the Islamic countries, also in the non-Muslim countries, and the demand growth driven by the trade as well as the risk diversification based on the asset-based risk sharing, equity-based risk and profit sharing based characteristics or features of the Islamic finance. And actually the COVID-19, the current circumstances once again proved the importance of Islamic values, and in relation to that, the Islamic finance as a part of the strengthening trend worldwide, the ESG and sustainable investments and sustainable economic growth. Of course, as Ms. Yasmin has already nicely pointed out the importance. First of all, we need to develop products. I mean, the demand here is, of course, driven mainly by the faith, but also the customers are looking for the economic efficiency and minimizing transaction costs, reducing information asymmetry and uncertainty based on the Sharia values, which I believe also will help the growth of Islamic finance. And actually, experts also in Islamic finance are looking for, and the customers looking for products based on trust. So from this perspective, and if you look at also the size of the...
Sorry to interrupt you. There is a distortion coming out from your mic. I think your mic is not...
How about now?
Yeah, hopefully it will be fine now.
So if you look at the size of the Islamic finance, yes, we've been saying the Islamic finance has been growing almost in two digits in the last 2 decades. Now assets under management exceeded $2 trillion. But if you look at the distribution of this assets under...
Sorry, Dr. Bildik, we can still hear the distortion. So I think in the meanwhile, we can fix this. I will move to the next speaker. Maybe you can try to fix or reconnect your mic, because there's a lot of distortion coming out. So now if I turn to Mr. Khalid to take his perspective on the topic. Mr. Khalid, as we know, Blossom Finance is the first company in the world which has issued micro sukuk that are based on blockchain technology. And that was issued for more than 100, if I'm not mistaken, more than 100 micro SMEs. So in your experience, how do you see the role of fintech in general and blockchain in particular for Islamic finance industry? And of course, you can also add on what are the key opportunities and challenges, in your opinion, for Islamic finance industry in this regard?
Thank you, Dr. Muhammad, and Assalamu alaikum, and thank you to Sabafi for the opportunity to speak. I think technology will be a source of disruption for those who do not leverage customer-centric technology. And for those that do focus on the customer with technology, like Apple, Amazon, all these guys that we know very well, they will end up quite quickly dominating this space. So customer-centric technology, retail-focused technology is, I think, a crucial part of that story. Now, in my past life, when I was at Moody's, I was global head of Islamic finance, and I covered 60 Islamic and conventional banks. I looked at Sukuk markets, which are now probably 500 billion in size. And most of that 2 trillion, 2.5 trillion that you talk about actually doesn't really do much for the community, I would say, doesn't do much for social impact, doesn't really make a difference, I think, at the lowest end. One of the previous speakers spoke about inequality. I think part of the Islamic finance mission is really to help those at the lower end of the income pyramid. And as yet, I don't think the industry has done much pardon me, for that sector. So Blossom is in particular focused on Sukuk, but really bringing it down to the retail, really bringing it down to the lowest level of access that is currently prohibitive. If you want to invest in a Sukuk, your minimum subscription size is $100,000. There's not a lot of people that have $100,000 to invest, plus the cost of issuing a Sukuk. You know, unless you're issuing $20 million, $30 million, the cost of issuing a Sukuk is prohibitive. So whether you're a small business, a small microfinance institution, or a small investor, you are actually excluded, and Yasmin mentioned about financial exclusion. Most Muslims are actually excluded from Sukuk market participation. It doesn't function for them. So when you start using technology, in particular for me, blockchain and tokenization, we can start to bring down transaction sizes and Sukuk sizes much more down to the retail, local type of level. And for me personally, I think tokenization will be as important for banking as the internet. It's really the underlying backbone. People will build their applications on top. I don't know whether it'll be Ethereum blockchain or another blockchain, but for the time being, Blossom is focused on Ethereum because of its smart contract functionality. And it's here that we last September issued the first primary issuance of a Sukuk on the blockchain. So Blossom has around, even though it hadn't launched, we had around 2,000 people from Argentina to New Zealand who had registered for social impact investing, Muslims, non-Muslims, but we are focused at the moment on Indonesia because you have $1 trillion economy, you have over 60 million micro businesses employing around 90% of the population. So for retail social Sukuk, it's the natural place to start. In that context, one of the investors said, look, I really love what you're doing. Can you issue a Sukuk just for me? So now, if we try to do that in the current financial system, there's no way on earth you can issue a Sukuk just for one person. And this is the world's smallest Sukuk, $50,000. So this investor said, look, I love what you're doing. I like the story. I'm willing to work with you, and let's do something just for me. Now, if you go to Goldman Sachs or HSBC and ask them that you want to do a $50,000 Sukuk, they'll say, look, that won't even switch on the lights for us. So we basically on the blockchain for this microfinance institution, BMT Bina Umma in Indonesia, worked with them. It took a long time, actually, over a year of the legal side of things actually was a bit of a complexity in this thing. But on the blockchain, we issued a $50,000 Sukuk. It's the world's first for microfinance. The Sukuk currently is funding 187 micro businesses. So it's actually more like a securitization. The performance of the Sukuk is backed by the performance of these micro businesses. If this is a genuine mudaraba profit share, not the superficial mudaraba profit share that the industry likes to use, where the income is variable. As the portfolio does well, your income goes up. As the portfolio does badly, as we're seeing in COVID, for example, the income is going down because the objective is not to put the microfinance institution under pressure. At the same time, they're facing their own pressure from their own micro businesses. So this is a lot of what we do in Islamic banking doesn't really support the customer when there are problems like COVID. So this is another first in terms of that mudaraba aspect. The profit is variable, dependent on the performance of these micro businesses. In addition, we use the Ethereum ERC20 standard. It's worth highlighting that the use of this standard means that this sukuk, in theory, could trade on any exchange anywhere in the world that uses the same standard. So whether it's a Swiss exchange, whether it's a Astana crypto exchange, you could actually trade this sukuk on that platform if they were listing sukuk at this time. So really unlocking the global potential of sukuk. The last thing I want to actually do is to share the performance of this sukuk, because there's a lot of people that talk about Islamic finance and fintech, but we are actually doing something. Can you see my screen at the moment, Mohammed? Perfect. Okay. So look, this is not theory. This is fact. This is there. It's been running for 9 months, and we publish. We're very, like, from my Moody's days, we are very focused on investor transparency. Where is your money going? What is it doing? How is it doing? There's a lot of crowdfunding. There's a lot of peer-to-peer lending. Alternative finance is I think around a 2 trillion industry globally. It's not very clear where your money actually goes, but drawing upon my Moody's background, the investor should know exactly what is happening. And I think it was mentioned by the previous panelist, you know, transparency, materiality, seeing where your money goes is something very important for consumers. So here you can see the profit. This is not charity. This is sustainable investing. You are investing here in 187 micro businesses in Indonesia. The profit rates being generated are approaching 15%, but this was pre-COVID. Now, what we've seen, the full numbers are not out yet. They will be out actually end of this month. We will publish soon, the next quarter. Despite COVID, these micro businesses still have to work. They do not have the option of staying at home and sitting on a Zoom call to conduct their business. These are street traders. These are sort of market sellers, fruit sellers, you know, all these sort of micro businesses. And it looks like still their performance will be in around the 13%. So you can see the income is dropping, but still very resilient. And so investing in micro businesses doesn't have to be charity. It could be a sustainable way to grow prosperity amongst those at the lowest end of the income scale. We all talk about the billion-dollar Saudi sukuk or the, you know, all these multi-million-dollar sukuk. They don't really do much for the people at the bottom of the pyramid. And in this world of quantitative easing, money printing, these are the people who are most being hurt by the trends. Fintech, it was mentioned that fintech is just as important for Islamic as conventional. I actually disagree. I think fintech is more important for Islamic than conventional. Rather than just copying what conventional does, fintech will allow Islamic to move closer to, I believe, its social impact mission, because the cost of looking after these types of customers is too expensive for big banks. Fintech allows us to move into that segment and to bank these underbanked people that were talked about before. So just to close, I mean, you can see here, this is a 1-year sukuk maturity. The microfinance institution typically has to borrow from the big banks. The big banks charge them extortionate amounts for short-term liquidity, whereas we've been able to give them 1-year funding, stable funding. Because what happens around Ramadan and school season, around Eid, a lot of their customers pull the money out of the bank, the microfinance, puts the microfinance under pressure. We have given them 1 year of funding, which means that they can do their business in a more stable way. Now, just to close, on the back of that issuance, we now have another 6 microfinance institutions in Indonesia who want to try to use the same technology. We have our own internal rating system as to which ones we think are safe or strong for investors versus which ones we think are too risky for the time being. But the platform, we hope, inshallah, will be fully launched by the end of July to have full retail access. That will be the proof. It's great that we found one investor who was highly motivated and wanted to make a difference. Will the rest of the population, will the rest of consumers want to do the same? The issue is, it doesn't have to be charity. On your current account, savings account in an Islamic bank, you're probably getting 0%. If you're lucky, you're getting 1% profit rate on your savings. Here, so far, even despite COVID, it looks like it may pay more than 10%. So you can earn a return and help micro businesses and be social impactful at the same time. But this is that part of the story is still theory. Inshallah, we will see where the market goes, but that sort of concludes my session. Thank you, Dr. Muhammad.
Thank you, Mr. Khalid, for sharing your wonderful experience with us. I'm sure that many of our audience, they have liked your project, and they will show your interest on that also. Now I would like to take Mr. Munshi's opinion on current fintech practices and area of adoption. Mr. Munshi, in recent years, we have seen a growing trend of impact investment as well as social finance project based on fintech, as also mentioned by Mr. Khalid, that the social finance projects, they are more close to the Islamic social values. So one of your project that we know that global Sadaqah is a good example of it. Please share your experience and also tell us what do you think about other areas of adoption in Islamic finance industry?
Sure. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's good to be here. Thank you very much to Sibafi and AIFC for inviting me. I was in Astana last year, about 9 months ago, and hopefully soon we can travel again and meet each other. I have one main point, and it echoes what Brother Khalid said earlier, which is that I feel that Islamic fintech is an opportunity, and very likely an unprecedented opportunity in the modern times for Islamic finance to actually go back to what it was created to do or what it's meant to do. And that is to fulfill the objectives of the Sharia, the Maqasid al-Sharia. And that includes the things that have been mentioned before this, which is financial inclusivity, impact, having impactful, participatory, fair, transparent, just transactions. And, if you look at Islamic finance today, I'm sure you can find a lot of examples and criticisms online or just by speaking to people in the industry. So we're not here to talk about problems, we're here to talk about solutions. And the question here is it a growth lever or is it a form of disruption? And beyond just a growth lever, I think this is the opportunity, this is the time. In business or in the economy, a lot of things have to do with timing, right? And we can plan. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will decide when's the right time. So right now, based on planning and based on urgency and based on need, it looks very much like Islamic finance can come to its true form, or the form that I feel personally that it should be with fintech, right? And here, I want to share firstly our own experience, which is very much focused on crowdfunding, and maybe touch on a little bit about the other types of fintech. So as you mentioned earlier, we do have a platform called Global Sadaqah. We have 2 running platforms and 1 more coming up, inshallah. So we have Global Sadaqah, we have Ethis Malaysia, and we have Ethis Indonesia. So Global Sadaqah and Ethis Indonesia are already operating. Global Sadaqah is a marketplace, or it's meant to be the nucleus of Islamic social finance. That's what we want to do. And how we hope to do that is by working with the incumbents. Right? We're not here to do everything ourselves. We're here to make it easier and better for everybody at all levels, from Islamic banks to religious organizations and institutions to Waqaf bodies to the normal individual giving or receiving zakat and sadaqah. So Alhamdulillah, Global Sedekah has managed to break some barriers by having successful collaborations and partnerships with banks. And now we are moving up one step or to another phase where we're trying to do more sustainable charity. In the past, it's more of just direct zakat and sedekah just to get the engine moving, to warm up the system. Now we're going more into Akad Hasan products as well as cash wakaf products. We are really supporting one cash wakaf in Singapore, and inshallah many more coming up in the next few months, especially with this COVID situation. These are solutions that are very, very viable and much better than just direct sedekah. Yeah, so this global sedekah. And for Atheist Indonesia, Alhamdulillah, we've been around for a long time, a little bit too long because we came out too early before crowdfunding was known in this part of the world, or before regulations came out. But Alhamdulillah, over the past six years now, we have channeled funds from around the world, from more than 50 countries. Investors of various different sizes have invested in Indonesian social housing projects with profit. So that is impact investment, good returns, typically double digits, with some asset backing behind it, the physical asset of the land or the building. So Alhamdulillah, this is new behavior in the Muslim world. Of course, we are open to everyone for the investment side, but based on names and based on our interaction, the majority of our investors are Muslims, because they tell us we can't find the investments that we want to invest in. Although there's so many financial products, how do we invest directly to the community? And one way is, as Blossom showed earlier, and another way is through Atheist Indonesia. So Alhamdulillah, more and more examples and use cases are coming up. So the next few years will be the test for us, the litmus test of whether we can do this at a much larger scale. And last one I want to touch on is Atheist Malaysia, which is the first Islamic equity crowdfunding platform in Malaysia, where we are allowed to do primary issuances of shares of companies and projects, as well as secondary trading. So we are a mini bursa in Malaysia that can serve SMEs, right? So now SMEs can get listed, although it's not a public listing, it is a way for them to raise funds using equity. And that is musyarakah, mudarabah. Of course, we will have many different variations of that as well. So at the end of the day, why I'm highlighting all these examples, not just to talk about myself, but to show how a new model like crowdfunding can help us to implement through Islamic finance. And this is something that is complementary to what we already have, or supplementary to what we already have in Islamic finance, which is mainly the big banks and the big fund managers. But the middle and the lower level, there's a huge gap, and that's where fintech can and is really starting to come in. Yep. So maybe I'll pause there and let the discussion continue.
Thank you, Mr. Munshi, as we are also running out of time. So thank you very much for your views, and I'm sure that our audiences have learned a lot of things from you. So now if I can invite Mr. Andrew to share his views on the topic, what he sees as fintech as disruption or a growth lever for Islamic finance industry. And also if you can share your experience on how regulatory policies can facilitate the adoption of fintech in Islamic finance industry. Mr. Andrew.
Thank you, Dr. Bilal. Many thanks to Sibafi for this opportunity, and especially to my friend, Dr. Abdul Ilah Belatik. And congratulations to the Astana Financial Center on everything you've achieved over the last 2 years. And congratulations also for overcoming the challenges of COVID-19 to host this session. Without diminishing in any way the wonderful work that Khalid Hawladar and Omar Munshi have just described to you, I want to just step back and perhaps present a little more broad picture, because most of my work is engaged with financial regulation, with bank risk, and governance. And it's not. I like history. I read a lot of history books in my spare time, and that's one of the reasons I like fintech, because fintech's got a long and noble history. It's almost as old as me. The first piece of fintech came out in 1967. 67. That was the first ATM that was set up by Barclays Bank in Enfield in North London. And then we saw a few years later, or a few decades later, the introduction of telephone banking by National Westminster Bank, which is now part of the Royal Bank of Scotland. We saw internet banking being introduced by people such as ING. And we moved on from there, with the existing providers dominating the scene. I mean, I think it's true to say that no big bank has gone out of existence for failure to keep up with financial technology. And so what I see fintech has been doing over the last 53 years is enabling people to do more easily, more quickly, more cheaply what they wanted to do anyway. Banks do essentially three things. They take people's deposits or investments, they finance them, either through loans or through Islamic financing, and they facilitate payments. That's what banks do. And fintech has enabled them to do that more cheaply, more easily, so from your mobile phone, and more quickly. So I don't see fintech as being disruptive. It's transformational, or it certainly hasn't been disruptive so far. Okay? And we've got to be very careful about saying this time it's different. Generally, people who say this time it's different are wrong about whatever it is that they think is different this time. So it's not it has not over the past 53 years been disruptive. It's actually almost consolidated the power of the major institutions. It has been transformational, and that is very important. I mean, the way in which we interact with financial institutions is much different now to the way in which my parents interacted with financial institutions. So what does this mean for the Islamic finance industry? One of the factors behind the rapid growth of Islamic finance, and there were many, but one of the factors, I believe, in, say, the 80s and the 90s, was the reduction in the cost of piety. The cost either in financial terms or in terms of convenience. It became as easy to have an Islamic current account as to have a conventional current account. It became as easy to have a murabaha investment account as it was to have a conventional time deposit. And so the cost of piety went down. I believe I'm correct in saying that if you open a current account with Saudi British Bank, which is a conventional bank, 40% owned by HSBC, Saudi British Bank, then you will have an Islamic account. You don't ask for an Islamic account. It is an Islamic account that they'll give you. And you will really not, as a consumer, tell the difference between that conventional account and a card Hasan. Clearly behind it, in the back of the shop, as it were, there's some different processes happening. There's some Islamic sanctioning, that's not quite the right word, there's Islamic approvals going on. But in terms of what you see in terms of your customer experience, there's no difference. So the cost of piety has been reduced. So the challenge for Islamic finance is, can you continue to do that? Given the massive investment in financial technology, to change the customer experience for conventional banks, can Islamic banks keep pace? I see no reason why they can't, but I do think that that is one of the challenges. The second challenge is Sharia approval. And if you look at blockchain, there has been some controversy within the scholarly community about blockchain. And we've seen scholar Adam here in the UK coming out with a very well-reasoned justification for blockchain within Islamic finance. But I think the Islamic financial community and the scholarly community certainly needs to ensure that whatever the opinion is, it's produced quickly. So if it turns out that there are things within fintech that are not appropriate for Sharia compliant finance, then we know about it quickly, and the Sharia compliant industry can adjust. I think there's also issues of consumer protection generally within fintech. And I know time is limited, but if one looks at blockchain, for example, I think there are huge consumer protection issues related to blockchain and the sort of coin offerings that we've seen in recent years. A large part of blockchain was an anarchic element. It was an anarchic philosophy that said that global finance was dominated by large banks who brought the financial sector to ruin in 2008, which they did. That's right, they did. And so we want to stop having our financial services intermediated by these people who messed up in the past. And wouldn't it be better if we could take them out of the picture and we can intermediate our financial services ourselves? Now, the problem with that is that our financial services are then intermediated by bits of code. I won't tell you which bank I bank with. It's a major international bank, and I hate them. I hate my bank. The only reason I don't move is because I know they'll mess it up so awfully if I try to move that all my standing orders will get missed. So I hate my bank. However, I'd rather continue to bank with them or one of their rivals than put my faith in a bunch of code and a bunch of computer programmers in a warehouse in the Arctic Circle because it's cold there and they don't use as much electricity. Because at least my bank is well regulated. At least when they, excuse my language, when they screw up, they're called in front of the British Parliament and embarrassed and asked questions. So I think there are issues, and this isn't, I've departed from Islamic finance, but I think there are issues that need to be addressed around consumer protection and regulation within the fintech industry, and Islamic finance needs to be part of that. So to sum up, I see fintech as hugely transformational in a very good way, and Umar Munshi and Khaled Haladar has given us very concrete examples of that, hugely transformational. I'm yet to be convinced that it's disruptive.
Thank you, Mr. Andrew. Thank you very much for sharing your experience and your views. Because we are running out of time, we have just 5 minutes left. So I will quickly go back to Dr. Bildik so that he can complete if he wants to share anything about on the topic. Please, Dr. Bildik.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes, it's clear.
Let me continue this way. Thank you very much. Sorry for the distortion in the noise. So I was mentioning about the distribution of the assets under management in Islamic finance. As you know, more than $2 trillion assets under management in Islamic finance. 72% is allocated to Islamic banking. The share of the Islamic capital market is so low. 24% more or less. It goes to Sukuk, and 3% the Islamic funds only. So, in that sense, comparing to the share of the Islamic banking, which is dominated by mostly the Muraba transactions, rather than the Mudaraba and Musharaka, more profit and loss sharing based transactions, is dominated by Muraba and Islamic banking, and the share of Islamic capital markets is unfortunately low. So I think we should put more effort to develop in this segment Islamic capital market. Equity investment, based on the Islamic finance characteristics, is the best fit instrument for the investors complying with the Sharia values. So in Turkey also, of course, if you look at the share of Islamic banking, including, I mean, Islamic finance overall, including Islamic banking in the Islamic countries, in just few countries, the share of Islamic finance more than 50%, just very few number of countries. So for this, we need to provide and offer more efficient and Sharia compliant innovative products to investors to attract them to invest into the Islamic finance products. In Turkey, for example, the share of the Islamic banking is around 5% in the total banking system. The goal of government is to increase this to 15% by 2023. So as Borsa Istanbul is a self-regulatory entity offering full scale products and the integrated business services from trading to settlement custody through our CSD and including a settlement bank. We've been working hard and partnering with the Islamic Banks Association in Turkey and also state organization of religious affairs to promote Islamic finance and especially the equity investment. Also, we have one index, equity Sharia compliant index, promoting the equity investment in Turkey, working closely with these entities to increase the share of the Islamic finance and especially equity investment. Also, we actively got involved to the issues of the crowdfunding legislation in Turkey. So new crowdfunding platforms, equity-based crowdfunding platforms are about to be launched nowadays, which will be working with also the CSD of Borsa Istanbul, which we believe that enhance the trust in the eyes of the investors. And trust here is a critical issue. Unfortunately, the lack of trust in the society hurting the development of the Islamic finance. So we need to provide solutions that fits that meets the needs of investors. Also on the Organization of Islamic Countries corporation side, OIC, COMSEC. Many years ago, we launched or we facilitate the launch of the S&P COMSEC 50 Sharia index, consisting 50 stocks from 19 different Islamic countries. And also nowadays, one of the Turkish portfolio management, asset management companies is about to launch a index fund based on this COMSEC 50 Sharia compliant index to promote equity investment also through this fund in these countries.
Thank you, Dr. Bilek. We have a couple of questions here, but unfortunately, because of time constraints, we are unable to answer those questions by the audience. So if I may conclude our panel session today, we can see fintech as a growth lever for Islamic finance industry, rather a disruption, as our panelists also share their experiences and views. And as also mentioned by Ms. Yasmin, that we have a huge gap of fintech growth, especially in Muslim countries because of the growing Muslim populations. And we can unbank, we can target, with the help of fintech, we can target unbanked population in Muslim countries. And as well as we have learned that fintech is more close to the principles of Sharia and the social agenda of Islamic finance. So now we have come to the end of our session, and Sibafi wishes to thank our host, the AIFC, distinguished speakers and panelists, and the panelists participants for your contribution in making this online event a success. Please visit our website www.sibafi.org and follow us on social media to know more about our upcoming events, publication, and other activities and initiatives. I thank you all the speakers and participants, and stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.